Hey everyone, I'm Connor, and today I'm here to show you guys the recipe that I use when I cook my dog Mouse food for the week. This recipe cooks about a 7 to 10 day supply, but that amount of time might vary depending on how athletic your dog is and your dog's ideal weight. My girl is a 55-pound pit bull, and she's pretty athletic. You guys may have seen my other video where she and I hiked 10 days on the Wonderland Trail together. So yeah, she goes through this pretty fast, but she really likes the meal. So let's see. I am a registered nurse. I'm not a vet, so I'm not a vet. But I did go through and look at all of the dietary requirements for dogs before I formulated this recipe for her for the first time. And I'm going to go ahead and include that in the comment section on this video because for me, one of the bigger frustrations when I was first trying to learn how to make dog food was that I could not find the nutritional requirements included in any of the videos. So I want you guys to be able to know that my recipe is going to be okay for your dogs to eat in the long term. So that's why I've included that in this video. Let's see, I make this recipe using the Instant Pot just because I find that to be the easiest, but this can be cooked without an Instant Pot. You just need to make sure that the meat's cooked all the way through. I know that some people are really into raw dog food diets, but I don't cook raw food for Mouse because, I mean, they have cells just like we have cells, and dogs can get salmonella or they can get other foodborne illness. So I like to make sure that my dog stays healthy when I cook her food. And one reason that I don't use dog food is there's recalls, and it's usually because of something like salmonella or E. coli gets in the food and it can kill your dog. So that is not something that that I want for my dog or yours. This recipe calls for a good amount of meat. I've gone ahead and pre-frozen mine in 1 pound increments just because that's the easiest way for me to store it. I cook this a little longer from frozen. The nice thing about the Instant Pot is that you can cook food straight from frozen, which is not something that you would generally want to do just on the stove. I'm going to go ahead and get started. The first thing I've got is 2 pounds of beef. And I just used ground beef from the supermarket. I used the lean stuff, the 93% protein and 7% fat. Because dogs, if they eat higher concentrations of fat, can get pancreatitis. And pancreatitis can be fatal in dogs. So it's important to keep the amount of fat that your dog is eating relatively small. That being said, just like people, dogs need fat to survive. And like I said, I used 2 pounds of beef. It's also okay to use pork, but I do try to make about half of the meat that I use red meat, because I understand there is a little more nutritional value to red meat than there is to poultry. So that's just something to keep in mind. I tend to alternate beef and pork every once in a while because it is a good idea to have variety in your dog's meal. Just like people have variety in their diets, it's important for dogs to have as much variety as you can give them as well if you want them to stay healthy. I also do 2 pounds of poultry, and I use generally at least half of the poultry is ground turkey, and just like with the beef, I try to get the higher quality, low-fat stuff. Unfortunately, that does generally tend to cost a little more, but I think it's worth it because I want my dog to have high-quality food that won't make her ill. And what I did is I got tired of doing this all by hand and sectioning it out every time that I did this recipe. If you do it that way, it can really take a long time to cook. So I bought myself one of those food saver doodads, and it has totally changed the way that I cook this meal. It goes way faster now. So I just section everything off into 1 pound increments, and then that's how I package it. I spent probably a good couple of hours getting everything sectioned out. I made enough to do this 3 times, all in a couple hours. So let me see, that was a pound of ground turkey. And this right here, for some variety, this is chicken gizzards, but it is totally okay to just use 2 pounds of the ground turkey, but I like the variety. So here goes, this is actually half a pound of gizzards. That's half a pound of chicken gizzards. And then I was able to find chicken heart as well, which I also got a half pound of here. Like I said, it was taking me a long time to cut everything up before. So what I did is I ended up just getting a food processor, and with all the sort of grosser things that I didn't want to cut by hand, I just stick it all in the food processor, and I hit the pulse button. And that generally tends to get it to the right consistency. You don't want to totally puree it because, well, if you cook it in an Instant Pot, then it's all going to sink to the bottom and it's going to come out when you pour it all out. But this works well, I found. And then the last thing that you're going to want is a pound of liver. Your dog needs organ meats in order to get all of the things that they need. So I always use a pound of liver. It's important not to use too much liver because liver contains a lot of copper and that can build up in their system. So you don't want that because that is not good for them. But you do want to put some liver in every batch that you make. The heart does not count as organ meat. That is a muscle. So that is muscle meat, just like the ground turkey or the ground chicken is. But you can use other secreting organs like thymus. You can use beef testicles. I don't use beef testicles. That's gross, but you can. You know, just those other organs that you generally just wouldn't think to use are good. And you can look up a list of those on the internet. But I do 5% of the total weight in, roughly 5% in the total weight of liver. And I do another 5% as another secreting organ. So liver's pretty easy to find. You can generally get that at like a Fred Meyer. For those of you that don't live where there's a Fred Meyer is a type of Kroger store. You can often just find it at the supermarket. You can definitely find it at the butcher. I like to use a combination of beef liver and chicken liver for the variety, but also because it's cheaper to buy chicken liver than it is beef liver. I don't like cooking, cutting, handling liver unless it's frozen because the consistency is kind of gross. So that's another reason that I like to freeze it, is I can just get this all done at once. I only have to handle the liver for a day, and then it's all pre-packaged. And then I can just throw it in my Instant Pot as a frozen thing, and I really don't like the way it smells when it's cooking. And the nice thing about the Instant Pot is I can just go ahead and cook it all, and the smell stays pretty much self-contained. And then I can just take the Instant Pot over to my sink, and I can just vent it into the hood, and then I only have to smell it for a short period of time. So that's almost all of the meat. The last thing I have here is the kidney. And I actually don't put the kidney in the Instant Pot because kidney is where pee comes from. So when you cook it, it's going to smell like pee. So I actually boil this separately because there's a lot of pee-ish water that comes off of it. I just don't want that in my dog's food. So I boil it separately. And before I package this and before you cook a pound of kidney, there's a couple things you need to know. When you buy it, it's going to have white fibrous tissue on it, and that's not edible. You only want the darker colored meat, okay? So you need to cut that all off. Once you get it in the size that you want, whether you do it by hand or in a food processor, if you don't want your whole house to smell like pee when you cook it, you need to soak it for a couple hours, and you can do that in mostly water with a little bit of vinegar and a little bit of salt mixed in. I usually do it overnight, to be real. Even so, it's still going to smell like pee when you cook it, so just be ready for that. With this, I'm going to stick it in a pot, and I'm going to cook it until, or I'm going to boil it in water until it is defrosted. And at that point, I'm going to cook it for another 10 minutes on full boil. And then I'm going to strain it all, and I'm going to add it to all this meaty goodness. when this is done and strained, and when the kidney is done and strained. That's all for the meat. So I'm gonna go wash my hands and I'll be right back. Alrighty, now that I've got my hands all clean, I'm going to go ahead and get my Instant Pot all set up. I should mention that I already put 2 cups of water in here because for my size Instant Pot, that's the minimum required amount of water for pressure cooking. So normally I would cook this for about 30, 35, maybe 40 minutes if this was all defrosted already. Like I said, you can go ahead and cook frozen food in Instant Pot, which is one of my favorite things about it. So the general rule of thumb with frozen meat is that you add 6 minutes of cook time at high pressure for every pound of frozen meat. So I'm going to go ahead and set this for about an hour. And I think that should be enough. I'm going to stick a thermometer in at the end and just make sure. And there we are. Now it's on. So that's all that you need to do to cook the beef and the poultry and the beef liver. And I'll show you guys how I cook the kidney later. But that's not it for protein. So the next thing I'm going to get all set up for you guys is eggs. Okie dokie. I've got a dozen eggs here. And for this recipe, I use 12 eggs. And one thing that you're going to want to know about this recipe is that you do need to save the eggshells, because dogs need more calcium than humans do. And if they don't get it, they get sick. They can get the dog equivalent of rickets. So I'm going to set those aside for later. I'm going to go wash my hands again, and I'll be right back. Alrighty, now that I got clean hands again, I've got a whisk, and I am about to scramble up these eggs. And I'm just going to end up frying these later on the range, like I would with scrambled eggs for people. A lot of people, when they scramble eggs, they add some milk. And one thing that you should know is that most dogs cannot tolerate cow's milk, but they usually can tolerate goat's milk. So I've got some goat's milk here. Goat's milk can be really expensive, and I don't personally drink it, so it can spoil. It's like a container this big is like $5. And the big containers are like 10 or 11, so that's ridiculous. What I usually do instead is I get the powdered stuff, and you can order these on Amazon for a really good price. You can also buy them at like a Fred Meyer's or a Kroger, so that makes it easy, and then it lasts way longer as well. Mouse also loves to drink this stuff, so that's great. Alrighty, so I just add just a little splash, and I'm going to whisk up these eggs. There we go. That looks good. Alright. So I'm just going to put that back in the fridge for a little while, and I'm going to fry that at the same time that I cook the kidney. Alrighty, now that I've got all my eggs cracked, I'm just finishing up loading the rest of my shells into my convection oven. If you're doing this in a normal oven, which is also alright, you would want to preheat it first, and you're going to want to preheat it to 200 degrees. But I found in these convection air fryer combination ovens, like the one that I'm using right now, you really don't need to preheat it, so that's kind of a nice perk. And I did rinse these eggs really well, 2 or 3 times until they're not slimy, because ideally you'd like to be able to store any calcium powder that's left over for a decent amount of time afterwards without having to throw them away. So if you cook these too hot, they don't smell good. So I cook them at 200. You only need to cook them for 10 minutes after the oven's hot, so my convection oven takes about 5 minutes to heat up, so I'm setting mine for 15. And I'm just going to turn that on. And so far as the eggs go, getting them prepared to grind, it's that easy. That's the only cooking that they need. So when this is done, I'll show you the next step. And in the meantime, I'm just waiting on my Instant Pot to be done. Alrighty, now that my eggshells are done cooking, it's time to go ahead and crush them up. I went ahead and bought a coffee grinder that I just used for this. At first I was trying to use my normal coffee grinder and clean it in between, but you just kind of can't get all the taste out. And I didn't really want my dog getting jacked on coffee. And frankly, I don't want eggshell flavor in my drink in the morning when I'm making my morning cup of coffee either. So they're cheap. Just buy one for this purpose. It's easy. So you just want to take your eggshells and crush them up in there. And you know that the eggshells are done because they get kind of brittle after you cook them. And that's how you know. Well, that and they're dry. They shouldn't be moist at all because part of the preserving process involves making sure that they're dry. I left the, I don't know if you can see that, I left the membranes in there. You don't need to take the membrane out if there's any membrane in there, but just fit as many of those in there as you can, and you just keep on doing this step until they're all done. Go ahead and turn that on. And one tip I have for you is after you process your eggshells, when you take the lid off, there's going to be a cloud of eggshell that comes out almost like it's smoke. And it doesn't taste or smell very good. It will get in your mouth. So I normally take my jar and I just have my jar ready to go. And I try to take the lid off slowly, but then to also have the lid open for the shortest amount of time that I can. And then I just get the cover right back on it. And that helps reduce that little cloud of egg nasty that comes out. So I already combined all the eggshells onto this little rack, and I crushed some of these before I turned the camera on, so that's all of it. But I'm just going to keep on doing this, and then it will be time to start cooking things on the stove and to start mixing the non-protein ingredients as well. Alrighty, so I've got a frying pan here, and I've got my pot full of kidney. And I left that kidney out on the countertop the whole time that I was doing all those other steps, so that it could defrost part of the way. And this pan is empty right now, but I'm about to put in some coconut oil. That's what I use when I cook my dog's eggs. You can also use olive oil. I understand canola oil's not the best option. I don't remember why, but for whatever reason, it just isn't the best option for dogs. It's not going to hurt them, but it's not as nutritional. Normally I'd have the fan on, especially so I don't have to smell this pea concoction. But I'm going to take one for the team this time and leave that off so y'all can hear me. I've just got my windows open. I'm waiting for that to come to a boil, and I'm just waiting for this to get hot enough. I've got it just a little above medium heat. So once that starts sizzling, I'm just going to pour the eggs and the goat's milk in there that we whipped up earlier. And I'm just going to fry it until it's a solid. It sort of has, I don't know, like a wobblier consistency when it's cooked than eggs with cow's milk. Like it kind of jiggles, almost like a Jell-O, which is kind of interesting. But, you know, the process is exactly the same. So what I don't do is add any salt or pepper. Sometimes I'll add a little bit of turmeric because turmeric's okay for dogs and it's also anti-inflammatory. But it does cook pretty fast, so I'm just going to scramble these eggs, and I'll be with you guys in a minute when it's all done. So at this point I have finished cooking the eggs. My kidney has come to a boil, and it smells freaking awful. Thank God I'm not the one eating it, but my dog loves the stuff. One thing to know is once that comes to a full boil, you do want to turn it down slightly because otherwise it will foam and boil over. At first I tried cooking it with a lid on, hoping that it would sort of minimize the smell. And it did minimize the smell until it boiled over all over the range, and then I had to clean up boiling pea. So don't do that, leave it uncovered. At this point I've got my microwave running, I am heating up some spinach. Let's see. Normally I try to go for 24 ounces. This is only 12 ounces, so I guess I'm going to have to go and buy some more tomorrow and add it to the dog food. But the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a broccoli and cauliflower mix. I don't always do a broccoli cauliflower mix. It's okay to do just broccoli. It's okay to do just cauliflower. Instead of the spinach, it's also okay to use collard greens. Like I said, variety is important when it comes to making dog food. So, you know, you can sort of look up what kind of greens you want to use. You do need to make sure that anything that you feed to your dog is safe for dogs, so you can just Google that to get the answer. So yeah, once this is done, I'm going to go ahead and strain it. The eggs are all cooked. I'm just going to leave those on the stove for a little bit. And once I'm done heating up my frozen products, I will start mixing everything together. I do generally get the frozen stuff just because I like to keep a big old stash of it around, and I like that it's already pre-cut. Like I said, I work full-time, and I'm not trying to spend a whole day cutting up everything. So, and honestly, that's what it was the first couple times I did this. It was like an all-day endeavor. So I've learned some tricks to make it go faster. Let me see. Another thing to know is a lot of the diets that I've seen online for dog food are like mostly meat. And that makes sense until you think a little more about it. Dogs are actually omnivores, just like we are. So they're not like cats that are obligate carnivores. You really don't want to give your dog an overload of meat. And the reason that that is important is that meat is processed out in the kidneys. And it can be really hard on the kidneys to process out too much protein. It's just too much nitrogen waste. It's not good for their kidneys. It's not good for your kidneys. You just shouldn't do it unless you're a cat. Generally, I aim for a little under 50%. 30 to 50% is what's generally recommended and used in commercial dog foods. And that is just sort of what I live by there. And I'm going to finish up over here now. At this point, I have all of my ingredients laid out in front of me. I poured the kidney into the rest of the meat once I strained it all out. Oh, and I should say, I let the Instant Pot natural release. I didn't press the pressure release button early. But I went ahead and made 6 cups of instant rice. You don't need to use instant rice, but I find that it's the fastest. I do always use white rice. It's also okay to use quinoa instead of rice, but I don't tend to use other types of rice. That's the first thing I'm going to pour in, just to get that out of the way. And you do want to use a really big pot for this, because there's a lot of ingredients going in here. And I generally use my pressure cooker, just because it's the biggest pot that I have. Next, I'm going to pour in the combination of all the meat that I'm going to use. That's already got the kidney in there. Next goes in the spinach. So here's the broccoli and the cauliflower. And then I'm going to put my wiggly eggs in. Alright, so here's all the stuff we haven't talked about yet. I do a lot of these things canned. It's okay to do them fresh, as long as, you know, they're cooked. So these are yams, cut yams, and I just get the Kroger brand usually, and these are the big old boys, the big cans. And when you use canned goods, you need to make sure that all of the ingredients that are in the can are safe for dogs to eat, right? So these yams have some sugar in there, and it's a good bit of sugar, but it's spread out over a whole lot of meals, so whatever. You also want to pick something that has the smallest amount of salt in it that you can, because canned foods are pretty salt heavy generally. There's about 4 pounds of yams right there. And the exact amounts of all this are going to be in the the recipe that I post. Got some potato, or not some potato, some pumpkin. And that definitely needs to be cooked. Not if it's canned. If you use it fresh, it's already cooked if you use it canned. Some beans. Dogs can definitely eat beans. So this is a combination blend, but you can use any type of bean. You check and make sure it's safe for your dog. This one is kidney beans, pinto beans, and black beans with some dog hair on it. And all these cans have already had the liquid drained out of them, by the way. Mackerel. That's for your omegas and whatnot. It's also okay to use canned salmon, but you do want to use a fatty fish, not like tilapia or something. Canned oysters. This is an 8-ounce can. These do serve a specific purpose. These are for zinc. Dogs need zinc. They also need, what is it? Taurine. They need a large amount of taurine for their heart. And oysters have a lot of taurine. So don't skip the oysters. It's also okay to use a can of clams. But when I use clams, because there's less of the important stuff in there, I usually use a slightly bigger can. So I'm going to go ahead and pour in the can of oysters. And then I have here a combination of peas and carrots. Usually I just use one or the other, but I found a combination can at the store, so that's what I'm going to use today. Alright, so supplements. Let's talk supplements. I have included ground flaxseed. And I have measured out on a kitchen scale 56 grams of flaxseed. I've got hemp hearts here. No, this isn't a cannabinoid, right? It's not going to get your dog high. It's food. And I use 30 grams of this, okay? This is a combination kelp glucosamine supplement, okay? This brand is called The Missing Link, and it's pet kelp formula. And more so than just the glucosamine, this also serves a specific purpose, all right? Dogs need iodine, just like people, or they get sick. So this is her source of iodine because kelp comes from the ocean and it's got a lot of iodine. So on the back of the bag, it says how much you should be using. So you want to take your dog's weight and multiply the recommended amount here on the bag by the number of meals, excuse me, by the number of days that you're serving, okay? I've got the correct amount for her, already all measured out. You'll need to calculate that yourself. If you're not sure how many meals that it's gonna make for your dog, it's okay, rather than mixing this in initially, to go ahead and just mix it in with each meal until you know how much you need. And then the next time you do it, you can just go ahead and take the correct amount for all the meals and just mix it right in there, okay? The eggshell powder, my little handy jar of eggshell powder, all right? I'm using 50 grams. It's a pretty full bowl with all of those supplements in there. This is a little dog food dish and it's totally full. So there's a good amount of supplementation going in there. And I'm just going to dump that in there. And then the final thing, which I realized right as I finished this off that I ran out of the last time I did this, and I forgot to get more, and that's cod liver oil. And that is another thing that serves a specific purpose. It's got vitamin A and vitamin D in it. And it also uses vitamin E as a preservative. And those are all things that your dog needs. So if you know anything about vitamins, a lot of what's in the cod liver oil are fat-soluble vitamins. And those are the types of vitamins that can build up in your system and become toxic. So you don't want to overdo it, right? So, you know, you can dish that out at first as well, just like you do with those other the other ingredients. And you can just do that until you figure out how many meals it's supposed to last. And then you can just, you know, multiply that correct amount by the number of meals and mix that all in. So I forgot to do that. And luckily, because I backpack and I home cook my dog's food when we're backpacking, I have a shelf-stable version of it that comes in capsules. So for tonight and tomorrow morning, until I can get to the store, I'm just going to mix in a capsule with each meal. But it's a lot easier to do it in the liquid form. It comes in a bottle, and that bottle just needs to be refrigerated after you open it. So, hey buddy, get out of there. At this point, just let me get my stirring spoon. It's pretty much just a matter of mixing this whole thing up. So, I'm gonna go ahead and get this all stirred up, and that'll be that so far as this step goes. And just a reminder, because of those supplements, you do need to be pretty thorough with stirring your big pot of dog food. So make sure that it's all in there well. Done properly, you shouldn't even really be able to tell there are supplements in there. It should just look like a seasoned meal. You don't want clumps, okay? So I'm going to double check here in a minute that I haven't forgotten anything, and then it's going to be time to feed my dog. So that's the best part, right? All right, doesn't look like I forgot anything, so it's just about time for Mouse to eat. This is what it looks like when it's done. And I do serve that with, you know, half a cup, 3/4 of a cup, roughly, of goat's milk, and that is included in her calorie count. And that's some extra calcium for her. Now, my dog is pretty athletic, and I weigh out 13 ounces of food for her a meal. That might be too much for your dog. If you got a big or even more athletic dog than I do, that might not be enough. You might just kind of need to play with it. You know, I would maybe start with a little too much at first, rather than not quite enough. And if your dog starts putting on some weight, just cut back the recipe a little bit. Yeah, that's pretty much that. So thank you guys for watching my video, and time to feed my mouse.